Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Harmony, your podcast host. Today, it is just me and you. It is just a solo episode learning all about adrenal fatigue. But before we get started, I wanted to remind you that this episode is sponsored by my 3 Months to Thrive program, which is a 12-month program supporting you through hormonal burnout to hormonal balance. It offers you one-to-one support with myself, accountability, and strategy with the goal of getting to the root cause of your hormonal imbalance and symptoms that have been holding you back from living your most inspired life. So if you are ready to take charge of your health, get off that hormonal roller coaster and increase your moods and energy, then please reach out and we can arrange a time to have a quick chat about the 3-month Thrive program, or you can just go to my website, harmonyinspiredhealth.com.au, and book straight in if you're a hell yes type of person. But now let's get on to the episode. So today I wanted to talk to you about adrenal fatigue. This is something that is becoming a lot more common, and I'm seeing a lot of women with adrenal fatigue in my women's health clinic. And I'm also getting a lot of questions about it. So I thought it'd be a really good opportunity to bring an episode all about adrenal fatigue. So what is adrenal fatigue? First of all, I'd just like to point out that it is known by many different names. So adrenal fatigue is what it's sort of known around in that natural health, naturopathy type of world, or adrenal insufficiency. The actual more accurate name is hypothalamic pituitary adrenal dysregulation, or HPA-axis dysregulation. And as a health professional, I prefer to use this term. However, I will use it interchangeably throughout this podcast episode because it's a big mouthful. So I'll probably be using HPA-axis dysregulation or just adrenal fatigue because it's easier to say. But first of all, I wanted to paint a picture of what someone looks like when they enter my clinic with adrenal fatigue. So often they explain that they feel really like wired and sort of like anxious and buzzing. They're always on the go with this constant underlining feeling of stress and anxiety. But then when it comes to going to sleep at night, when it comes to the evening, the afternoon, and throughout the day, they're even though they're feeling really, really wired, they're still feeling completely exhausted at the same time and really tired with a lot of brain fog. And then when it comes to the evening, even though they're feeling tired, they can't get to sleep, right? Or sometimes they're people who wake up utterly exhausted. Like they already feel exhausted when they wake up. But then in the evening, when it comes to going to bed and they want to fall asleep, they're like, oh yes, I can, I'm so exhausted. I just want to jump into bed and go to sleep. But then they do, and they can't. The insomnia hits. And they're like, what is going on? I'm so tired, but I can't get to sleep. And then if they do fall asleep at a reasonable time, they're often waking up in the middle of the night with erratic thoughts, or they're waking up at super early times in the morning, just still very exhausted though, not really recovered, not having a proper quality sleep. And then getting up in the morning for them feels like this cruel challenge every day. It's like they just felt like they didn't get enough rest to replenish themselves. Then they stumble into the kitchen, they make a huge pot of coffee because there's just no way that they would survive the day without that morning coffee. However, that coffee often makes them feel a lot more anxious after they consumed it. So those that already feel very wired with this underlying feeling of stress, they need that coffee to get them up in the morning and going. But then once they've had it, they feel worse and jittery and more anxious. They often complain that their body feels really puffy, like they've got a lot of fluid retention going a lot. I was going to say, oh my gosh, you know what? I'm recording this after I had an exam this morning, and then I've gone and had a massage, and I'm like, just in that floaty, nice, blissed out days. So sorry, I'm trying to get my words out here. But anyway, back to the adrenal fatigue patient, what they feel like. They probably sound a lot like me with a bit of brain fog and can't get their words articulated properly. But they do complain about feeling really puffy and fluidy in the body, and especially around that midsection, because that's sometimes a sign of having high cortisol. So often they complain that their jeans are feeling a lot tighter around their tummy, and they just can't lose the weight. Often they will be complaining of muscle ache, whether that be in their calves or sometimes it's in their hips. And they often can't think straight, or they're forgetting a lot of things throughout the day, like, that typical one where have I put my car keys? Oh my gosh. Or just like they have a to-do list and they've got it all written down, but they still forget to do some of the things, or even check the to-do list, because their brain is just feels so messy and muddled up. They may even be at the point where they've lost a lot of motivation and just passion for life. They're just like so tired that they're just like, meh, what is this? Like, life is just, man, and I just don't know what to do, and I've got no motivation because I'm so exhausted. And then with no motivation and with so much exhaustion, I don't have the energy to find my passion, let alone be passionate about anything. So they often walk in feeling very deflated, depleted, and like they don't have this grand purpose. They're just sort of on Groundhog Day, waking up fatigued, smashing themselves with caffeine or whatever they can do to keep themselves awake, feeling even more anxious and worse, and then wanting to go to sleep and then can't sleep. So everything really feels like a struggle because they're just too tired, or they overthink everything and feel anxious at the thought of social engagement or even tackling that to-do list. Like every little day-to-day activity feels like a mission. The stress of everyday life is really consuming them, and they don't know why, because they often then will compare themselves to other women or other people and think, oh my gosh, like look at her doing so much and look at me doing like nothing, and I feel like a failure. So it's this really it's just such an awful sort of thing to be in, because you're so exhausted, and even for the most driven and motivated people, they can get themselves in this slump and they start comparing themselves. They don't feel like themselves, and they feel just awful in their body and in their mind. They just don't know who they are anymore because they feel very disconnected to self a lot of the time. They often feel very jittery or lightheaded and dizzy, and this also can contribute to feelings of anxiety, and also having to take more rest and not being able to be as productive. And they find it really hard, as I said, to articulate what it is that they would like to say. So I know I sounded like that certainly at the start of the episode, but that was just because I'm so relaxed from my massage, guys. Don't worry, I'm not in adrenal fatigue. They often crave salty snacks and get really cranky if it's too long between meals. And they can't really make it throughout the day without having that little evening snack. So I guess I just wanted to ask you, if this sounds like you, then your adrenals probably need some love, because all of these signs and symptoms are pointing to adrenal fatigue or HPA axis dysregulation. Adrenal fatigue has definitely become a very common disorder that I help women overcome in my Ayurveda and Integrative Health clinic. So let's break it down a little bit and look at what the adrenals are and what is going on with HPA axis dysregulation. So the adrenals are two small triangular shaped glands that sit on top of the kidney. They are made up of the adrenal cortex, which is the outer layer, and the adrenal medulla, which is the inner layer. They are responsible for secreting certain hormones. So as you may know, the most I guess, famous hormone that they're known for is cortisol. This hormone is released in times of acute and chronic stress. And they also secrete adrenaline and noradrenaline. And these hormones are produced in times of acute stress when the fight or flight response is activated by the sympathetic nervous system. Aldosterone is also secreted, and that helps to control blood pressure by regulating electrolytes and the blood pressure. So often one of the symptoms is low blood pressure. And then they also produce androgens such as DHEA and testosterone. These are precursor hormones that are converted to estrogen in the ovaries and male hormones in the testes. And the adrenals, they also produce a very small amount of estrogen and progesterone. These are the women's sex hormones. The driving cause behind adrenal fatigue is stress. And that's why it can be so frustrating when you've actually got to that stage of adrenal fatigue. All of the symptoms then create more stress and catabolic activity in the body. So remember, the body doesn't differentiate the different types of stresses. Any inflammation, any systemic inflammation or stress in the body, or whether that's stress that you meet when you come to work and you have a full inbox, a nagging boss, or on the way you've got screaming kids that you have to drop off, or not even screaming kids, just rushing around to drop them to school to get them to work. And then you go jump out of your car and you're about to quickly cross the road to get to work, and another car zooms by and nearly hits you. And then there's a whole nother stress response that happens. So when you put all of these types of stresses on top of adrenal fatigue, it's no wonder your body is just crying for help. So whether that is physical, emotional, mental stress, or long-term illness, it is really taxing on the mind and body. Our mind and body are intricately connected. So when either one perceives stress, it signals to the brain that it is under stress, and our helpful adrenals come into bat for us by producing our stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline. When we're under any type of acute stress, so whether that be a scary dog chasing us down the street or an awkward confrontation with your boss, adrenaline will surge through the body. Adrenaline is inflammatory to the body. So its helpful friend cortisol follows to deal with that inflammation. And in acute situations, cortisol can be life-saving. So cortisol gets a lot of a bad rep, the cortisol being that bad, nasty stress hormone, but it has a purpose. That's why we produce it in our body, right? In acute situations, when, everything else is sort of in flow with our life and we have acute stressful situations, it's really life-saving. It helps us to manage infections or immediate danger. Cortisol in acute situations has an anti-inflammatory effect. However, when the mind and body is constantly faced with stress and cortisol production becomes chronic, it can affect the body in a number of ways. So this is what happens with chronic cortisol production. Number one, it can decrease our metabolic function. So hello, weight gain, puffiness, and those tight jeans. It breaks down muscle mass because cortisol loves to steal protein from your muscles and has a catabolic action. So again, hello, weight gain, loss of tone and decreased strength. It increases fluid retention. So our adrenals, they work in the body to help with fluid metabolism. So when they're not functioning properly, it increases fluid retention. So that's why you can get that edema, that puffy looking face or puffy around the body in all different sort of areas. It can also lead to increased weight gain, generally around the torso. So you get that thicker torso look, and again, those tighter fitting jeans or pants or skirt, whatever you want to put on. It also dysregulates blood sugar. So hello to those midday mood swings, feeling jittery and really hangry. So that's angry if you don't get fed. And dysregulated blood sugar leads to all other kinds of disorders that we do not want. And when we have dysregulated blood sugar and we have insulin spikes, again, when we've got insulin cruising around in the body, it's really hard to get into that fat burning mode. So you can see how it's like a domino effect with all of these different hormones. Long-term cortisol secretion, it really alters our immune system. So often people with adrenal fatigue, they come in a lot with frequent colds and illnesses, and they're like, oh my God, why am I always getting sick? I'm always catching a cold, because they have a lowered immune system from the increased cortisol production. And it can also, women, affect our menstrual cycles and PMS. Therefore, it also affects fertility. So women who are trying to fall pregnant and finding it hard to fall pregnant, you need to really look at your adrenals as well as your thyroid, but that's a whole nother podcast. The body is, however, quite resilient and can continue to function in this state, although not ideal, for quite some time. But when that time is up and the demands for cortisol go on and on due to chronic stresses, the body enters a negative feedback loop where the demands are met with resistance. This is when cortisol levels drop to an all-time low and additional symptoms plague the mind and body, such as chronic fatigue, stiffness, inflammatory conditions, and even autoimmune reactions can occur. So remember I said that cortisol can be a really wonderful, helpful hormone. When we produce it long-term over chronic stress issues, I've just listed out different things that can happen in the mind and body. But then when it's met with resistance and it drops to an all-time low, you also lose the good benefits that cortisol can bring. So when we've reached this state, there can be an interference with the communication between the hypothalamus in the brain and the pituitary gland and the adrenal glands. Hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis dysregulation, aka adrenal fatigue, can present as a mix of some or all of the symptoms mentioned above. The main symptom that I see in my women's health clinic are fatigue, irregular cycles, PMS, insomnia, anxiety, poor memory and brain fog, low blood pressure, lowered immunity, salt cravings, because remember the adrenals help to regulate our electrolytes, and unexplained weight gain. These symptoms are often amplified in women who are shift workers, new mothers who don't get any sleep and their body's just gone through massive changes, and or women who are experiencing sleep deprivation or circadian rhythm disruption. And that's where Ayurveda really fits in beautifully, because it helps us get our body into a natural circadian rhythm again. Which leads me on to treating HPA axis dysregulation or adrenal fatigue. Like, how do we do that? It is no surprise that the treatment for adrenal fatigue starts with stress management and ways to get your body moving into a parasympathetic state, which is our rest and digest state throughout the day, giving it a much needed break from the fight or flight mode, which is governed by the sympathetic nervous system. As an Ayurveda and integrative medicine practitioner, I do lifestyle and daily routine dinacharya audits with my clients. We look at ways that we can create a routine that will really honor their mind, body, and stress response. So getting to know those triggers and ways that we can implement small shifts and change throughout your day that can help manage that stress response being triggered. We look at Ayurvedic psychology and limiting belief patterns that are creating a subconscious stress response in the mind and the body, and ways to rewire the neural pathways in order to calm the nervous system. So we really want to emphasize calming the central nervous system and toning that vagus nerve and getting into that parasympathetic state as much as we can throughout the day, because this will really help reduce that cortisol production from the adrenals. And it will also help regulate our circadian rhythm, so that if we're one of those people who have got to that like end stage of like all-time low with the cortisol, we can start to re-regulate the adrenals so they can actually secrete an appropriate amount for our stress response. I often incorporate different meditation practices, breath work, or yoga postures in my treatment protocols, as well as herbal medicine, specifically for adrenal health, the nervous system, and cortisol regulation. Eating a wholesome, nutrient-rich diet is extremely important for those suffering from adrenal fatigue. When you're under a lot of stress, the body consumes essential vitamins and minerals such as magnesium, vitamin Bs, zinc, and other important vitamins and minerals. So if you're not getting enough of them through your food, you may have to take nutritional supplements for a while to get your body back into more of a balanced state and to get the adrenals functioning properly, secreting the appropriate amount of hormones as well. We also look at ways to regulate sleep, as this has a great impact on your nervous system and inflammation in the body. We also look at ways to reduce systemic inflammation and bring the body back to a more balanced state. A lot of the time, the quote unquote weight gain is not always fat gain. It's often fluid or toxins residing in the adipose tissue. So it can be seen as this systemic inflammatory response. And if we can start to reduce the inflammation and get the fluid balance right, then those genes just start to fit a lot better without having to go on any crazy diets, which you should never do when you have adrenal fatigue anyway, or hardcore exercise, which again, you shouldn't be doing with adrenal fatigue. There's very specific things that you should do and should not do with it to recover properly. There is an Ayurvedic concept called Agni, which is often referred to as digestive fire, but it is also the metabolic functioning of all of the cells in the body. The metabolic function of your cells governs energy. So we look very closely at ways that we can increase your Agni as well as part of the treatment protocol for adrenal fatigue. You really need that strong digestive fire to break down your food and extract the nutrients from the food so that the body can assimilate the vitamins and minerals it needs for proper cellular function. The Agni in your cells act as the spark plugs for your body. So strong cellular Agni is required for energy production. That's why we put so much emphasis on building really strong, good Agni in Ayurveda, and really looking at how the gut functions and interacts with hormones as well. So you might be wondering, are there any tests that we can do to diagnose adrenal fatigue? Well, yes, there are a number of salivary, blood, and urine tests that you can do to test cortisol levels throughout the day and DHEA levels. However, a test is not always required if you find a practitioner who can take a detailed history and understand the key signs and symptoms of adrenal fatigue. It is also important to not ignore some of the symptoms outlined in this episode that we've gone over, as they may need further investigation to rule out other more sinister diseases. A good practitioner will also know when to refer to for other testing if required, or other practitioners if we need to look at more sinister diseases going on. So that is a snapshot of adrenal fatigue and how we go through a treatment protocol. I do often do often. Oh my gosh, why did I decide to record this podcast after a massage? Oh dear, sorry guys. I do offer functional lab tests in my clinic or my face-to-face consultations via telehealth. So we can get them arranged and they get sent to your house. But I also go through a really in-depth, detailed initial consultation with you so that we can go over personalized treatment protocols and look at your history and really see what's going on and how. We always look at how that disease manifested as well. So for those of you who are curious to find out if you could be suffering adrenal fatigue or if you think you are, please reach out, please get in contact, because I would love to help you get more energy, get your life back and live symptom free so that you can do more of the things that you love, that light you up, you know, be an awesome mom, be an awesome human, all of the things. And I highly recommend my 3-month Thrive program, because someone with adrenal fatigue, you know, it's not a quick fix. There's no quick fixes. It takes time. It takes reviewing the protocol. It takes mixing different herbal prescriptions to see where you're at on your healing journey. So please reach out if you have any questions, or go to my website, harmonyinspiredhealth.com.au, to book yourself in to the 3-month Thrive program. Or if you would like to chat more about it to see if the Thrive program is right for you, you can always book in for a discovery call as well, a free discovery call. So I hope this has been helpful. Again, sorry for muddling up so many of my words. Next time I'll be doing the podcast episode before I go and have a blissed out body treatment. All right. Thank you for sticking with me. Namaste, everybody. Have an amazing day.